Welcome back. I am so excited to have you back to my channel, Jennifer's Storytime. So today we're going to talk about one of my favorite people, Taraji P. Henson. Yes, she is beautiful, she is so talented, and she is just someone I have always admired. And we're going to talk about her being reincarnated by Tammi Terrell, also another legend. And if you don't know who she is, don't worry about it. It might be before your time, so we will touch on that. But before we begin, I wanted to talk about Soul Tea Blends. It is my tea company, and this is a tea that I drink regularly. It's called Iron Builder. And Iron Builder is great for people who suffer from anemia. I used to have severe anemia, and if you know the symptoms, you know that you get cold, you get tired, you get confused. I even had to get hospitalized and get multiple blood transfusions. But since I've started taking this, I haven't had any of those issues. So don't take my word for it. Go to mysoulteablends.com and get 15% off your very first order. And don't worry about it, I will drop the link in the description. It's really tasty, by the way, too. It has a really mild, earthy taste, so it's not something that's going to be too overwhelming. But let's jump into this story. So Tammi Terrell was born April 29th, 1945. She was actually born as Thomasina Winifred Montgomery. And this is because her parents thought that she was going to be a boy, so they planned on naming her Thomas. So her father was a local politician and a barbershop owner, and her mother, Jenny, was an actress. So Tammi was the oldest of three, and she just loved to perform as a child. She even took piano lessons. She would jump on the piano and sing for everyone every chance she got. She just knew at a young age that she would be a star, and she was right. So as vibrant as she was, she would get these really bad headaches that started when she was a child. And her family noticed she had a vein on her head that was protruding. But they didn't think much of it because headaches ran in the family. The mom would get bad migraines. So they ended up just getting her glasses, thinking this might help the issue. So when Tammi was about 11 years old, tragedy struck, and she was raped by 3 older boys. But unfortunately, it kind of got, I guess, swept under the rug. And this really changed her, and she was never the same. So Tammi began to get rebellious and wild, and she decided to actually change her name to Tammi after she watched a movie called Tammi and the Bachelor, and hearing the theme song, Tammi. And at this time, she was 12 years old. So it seems that Tammi put all of her energy into her singing. She has this new name, so she really put herself out there, and she actually got signed with a few different labels before meeting James Brown. And it was said that her mother actually called James Brown to come and watch her perform. So James Brown met her and liked what he heard, so he decided to sign her to his label called Try Me label. So in 1962, 17-year-old Tammi began to get involved with James Brown, who was 12 years older than her at the time, and he began to abuse her. And it got so bad till one night he was performing in 1963, and Tammi didn't watch the whole performance. So he beat her so badly to where she was leaking blood. So this became too much for her. She called her mom and left that situation. So fast forward April 1965, she was performing at the 20 Grand Club in Detroit, and she was spotted by Motown CEO Berry Gordy, and he was a huge deal. So he promised to sign her to Motown, and of course she agreed, and she signed with the label on her 20th birthday. So things were starting to turn around for her. She went on the Motown tour with the Temptations, and she met the lead singer David Ruffin, and he fell head over heels. It was probably a love at first sight, and they quickly became an item. So in 1966, they really started to heat up with their relationship, so much to where when they were performing on stage, David actually proposed to her. And I'm sure she was so excited until she found out that he had already been married, he had 3 kids, and a girlfriend in Detroit. So this was, of course, a lot for Tammi, on top of his drug addiction that most of you probably know if you watch any of the Temptations documentaries. And this made him really violent. So much to the point where he actually hit her in the head with a motorcycle helmet. And it didn't stop there. It was also rumored that he hit her in the head with a hammer. And this just further complicated her unknown condition with the headaches. So she eventually left him. So after this, things started to turn around and her career really started to take off even more. She started doing these duets with the famous Marvin Gaye, and these two were magic together. They had 7 top 40 singles, and 3 of those were Ain't No Mountain High Enough, You're All I Need to Get By, and Ain't Nothing Like the Real Thing. I know a lot of you have heard those songs even still today. Her and Marvin Gaye were performing at a concert at a college, and this was October 14th, 1967, and she collapsed right into Marvin's arms on stage. So shortly after, she found out that she had a brain tumor. So she had 8 unsuccessful surgeries. By 1970, Tammi was confined to a wheelchair. She lost her eyesight, she lost her hair, and she was only 93 pounds. So it was reported that she went into a coma, and March 16th, 1970, she sadly died at the age of only 24 years old. This is so sad. Like, this really touched my heart. She had such a short life. She did a lot within that lifetime. Maybe she knew in her heart that she would die at a young age. So Taraji was born September 11th of 1970 in Washington, D.C. to 2 loving parents. She described them as being very supportive. Her dad was in the military. So as a child, Taraji already started to show that performing bug. She recalled a time when she was in kindergarten. She got up in front of the class and just started singing her heart out. And then she did something funny and it made the whole class laugh. And from there, she knew she had something special. So this happened again when she was about in the 5th grade. She performed in front of the class. They enjoyed it, of course. And her teacher took notice and decided to put her into an arts class. And this was probably the best thing for her. So as a teenager, she got into the Miss Talented Teen Pageant in DC, and she got first runner-up. So Taraji wanted to take it a step further. She tried to get into the Duke Ellington School of Arts, but unfortunately she didn't get in. And she thought this was the end of her career if she only knew then what she knows now, right? But she continued on. She ended up going to Oxon Hill High School. She graduated in 1988, and from there she went to North Carolina A&T State University, where she pursued her degree for electrical engineering. But she ended up dropping out because of a failed math test. Girl, I completely understand. I hated math. I did just enough to get by. So she ended up going off for different jobs, and one of those included working for the Department of Defense at the Pentagon. So Taraji ended up getting a scholarship to go to Howard University. And in her junior year of college, she discovered she was pregnant. But she knew she was keeping her baby. She knew this was not going to stop her. She kept up with her performance schedules. She even told one of her professors, like, look, do not treat me any differently. Do not bench me because I'm going to do this. And she did. She continued on juggling her responsibilities. She kept working to pay off her student loans. Being a single mom and going to class is really hard, but she kept telling herself one piece of advice: this is part of my journey, act accordingly. And she did. So early in her pregnancy, Taraji performed in a Greek tragedy. During her second semester, she sang and danced in Dreamgirls. After she had her son, Marcel, she kept up her classroom attendance and performances with her baby. And in 1995, she achieved her goal of graduating from Howard University with a degree in theater. Taraji walked across that stage with her infant son. I have a picture. And in 1996, Henson and her son moved to LA so she could pursue her professional acting career. So she only had $700 in her bank account at the time. After 2 years of auditioning while also working an office job to make ends meet, she landed her first professional acting gig, a reoccurring role on the television show Smart Guy. So the role led to a part on the sitcom Sister Sister, starring the teen twins Tia and Tamara. And early in her career, she also made her appearance on TV's Homicide: Life on the Streets and the popular medical drama ER. So Taraji had a boyfriend who was the father of her son Marcel. They were high school sweethearts, but somewhere along the way he became abusive, so much to the point where he beat her up and she was bleeding out of her mouth and all across her teeth. And I think at this point she was at her breaking point, and she said, you know what, get your stuff and get out. And she probably wanted to do what was best for her small son. So she ended up sort of distancing herself from him. Her father told her, you really need to try to make up with him. You guys really need to be on the same page, basically. And he ended up seeing his son again. They played a game and everything. He had that quality time with him. And shortly after that, she found out from her mother that her baby's father got murdered. So Marcel was about 9 years old at the time. She didn't want to tell him that he was murdered, so she said it was an accident. Later in life, he ended up finding out that he was in fact murdered and he had to get therapy. But I know that she was doing the best that she could do at that time. And that was really tragic to tell a 9-year-old that your father at a young age was murdered, because he was in his 30s when he was murdered. He didn't live a long life at all. So at this point, I'm sure that Taraji was devastated. You know, this still was the father of her son. This was her high school sweetheart. And now he's been killed in such a tragic way. So I want to touch on Taraji P. Henson's father, Boris. Boris, as I mentioned, served in the military. He was in the Vietnam War, and sadly, when he returned, he dealt with some post-traumatic stress disorder issues. And this is important because it's part of Taraji's story. She actually started a foundation in his name, and she's also dealt with some personal mental issues. She mentioned times where she didn't even want to get out the bed. She mentioned, wanting to take her life at a certain point. She's been really open about this. And this is definitely going to come up again when we talk about the similarities in the Tammi story. But sadly, her father, Boris, he passed away a couple years after her son's father passed away, and he died of cancer. So Taraji knew that she was destined for more. She got these different parts here and there, but it was nowhere near on the scale that she had in her mind. So she ended up getting cast for Baby Boy. Her friends told her, you know what, this is it. John Singleton makes stars. You need to do this. So in the back of her mind, she knew she was going to do it, but she said, Tyrese is probably going to get further because of this than me. And she was right at that time, because right after that, Tyrese got cast for Fast and the Furious. So meanwhile, Taraji's still fighting, being told she's too old, she has a child, and eventually she ends up getting an Oscar nomination, but she lost to Penelope Cruz. She was devastated, but guess what? Tyler Perry took notice and put her in some of his movies, like I Can Do Bad by Myself, No Good Deeds, and this took her even further. And people started to take notice. So eventually Empire was brought to her, and she was a little unsure about it because of the stereotypes of Black women, but she just went with her gut and just did it. And look at where she's at now. Okay, so now we're going to get into these similarities. So as you know, maybe you've already realized this by listening to my stories, but Taraji was born in the same year that Tammi passed away, only 6 months later. Taraji was born September 11th, 1970. And Tammi passed away March 16th, 1970. Now, if you follow reincarnation stories, this is pretty common. Usually there's not much time that passes before the next individual is born from the reincarnation. Usually maybe months to a couple of years in my experience. And number 2, these two look exactly alike. Look at these two. They are eerily similar. I was even looking at their baby pictures when they were kids, and I actually got confused with the photos in my phone for a minute because they looked exactly the same. I couldn't tell them apart. So number 3, they both have amazing singing voices, and not just any singing, like they can sing, like they both have that old school, soulful way about them. And Tammi was often told that her voice sounded like she was much older than what she was, and people were so taken aback by this. And I was watching Taraji sing, and I was blown away. Like, she sounded like someone from back in the day, because that type of singing and the singing we have now is no comparison. I'm sorry, but back in the day, they had those real, authentic sounding voices, and they both have that. So I was realizing it from their stories, but Tammi's mother suffered from mental illness, and as I mentioned, Taraji's father also had some mental things going on. And it doesn't just stop there. What I'm thinking is, because when you come from a past life, if you have so much trauma, that can be brought into your next life and manifest in different ways. And this may be why Taraji has so much anxiety and depression, because she can feel that energy of her past life. So number 5, if you notice, Tammi and Taraji have both dealt with domestic violence in their relationships. And I don't feel like this is by accident either, because sometimes when you have such a light about you, like these two women, some people are out there just to dim your light. And also, if you've been through some different things and you reveal this to your partner, sometimes they can use that against you. And lastly, but certainly not least, the fact that these two fought so hard for what they wanted at a very young age. They both showed signs of doing and claiming what it is that they were meant to do. I was listening to Tammy's sister, and she mentioned that the song Ain't No Mountain High Enough was so symbolic of Tammi, because there was never a mountain that was too big for her to climb. even with the severe headaches that she had that ended up being a brain tumor, she still kept pushing through with all the tragedies that she was faced with. She did not stop going. Similar to Taraji, she dealt with abuse, she dealt with being turned away, she dealt with the loss of her father and her first love, and she did not let that stop her. She got all the way to the finish line. And she likes to joke and say that she's a late bloomer, but that shows even more so that she did not give up. She kept fighting, because some people are faced with a few things and they throw in the towel, but not these women. And I hope that you enjoyed this story. And if you have any stories that you want me to do, definitely let me know in the comments.